Thank you, Nathan. Mabuhay. So I'm from the Philippines, but I'm actually calling in from Hong Kong. So I'm based in Hong Kong. So my presentation is called From Asog to Bakla to Transpinay. That's weaving a complex history of transness and decolonization. I'll also be extracting a few of the texts that I have published with Alon at the Journal of Filipinx Studies that was released last year. So to the next slide, please. We have here an image of, yes, so several images. Of course, credits to the original owners of the image, one of which in the upper right-hand most corner of this PowerPoint, and that is a mural painting done by Carlos Botong Francisco, a Filipino national artist. And that actually reflects the medicinal healing, shamanistic practice of pre-colonial times in the Philippines. And all of the images that we see here on this page are examples of the power of the shamans and the high priests and warrior healers of the Philippine pre-colonial years. And they were collectively called as or referred to as babaylan or bailan, or it depends on different parts of the Philippines. The Philippines is an archipelago. Usually we're counted as having 7,107 more or less islands. And in many of the islands in the country, we have different practices and we have different languages. But what is common during the pre-colonial times are the presence of the babaylans. So in matriarchal Philippines, that which was once an animist society, women, very specifically femininity, not just in women, but in the pre-colonial people, were revered because of the power that comes with the femininity. In fact, it was once believed that there is no spirituality with no femininity. So women were usually potentially seen as bringers of life, or in some ways having the ability to commune with the spirits, to bring forth life and the extension of life. That is why in terms of social roles, which you may sometimes consider to be gender roles these days, women were mostly elevated to a class of shamans. As shamans, their powers come twofold: that which can heal and commune with the benevolent forces of nature, and that which can also curse and seek wrath from the malevolent forces. And the thing is, during the pre-colonial times, the women called babaylan in our society were treated almost with the greatest reverence. And the only other person who was occupied a greater social power over the babaylan is usually called the datu or the raja, the head of state or the head of the society. But not all of the babaylans were women or assigned or assumed women at birth. Actually, many of them as well were queer and trans people. And we were usually referred to as asogs or bayogs or Catalonan, depending on which part of the country we're found. To the next slide, please. So from 1521 onwards, when the Spanish came to the Philippines, that is when the colonization has started, some of the modern Filipinos may be wondering whatever happened to our LGBTQI people, very specifically trans people. Well, that is very difficult to trace because during the early part of the colonial years, there has been the marginalization or the beginning of the marginalization, the invisibility and the oppression of LGBTQI people. Most of them were practitioners of the babaylan, and most of them were also babaylan. So what was happening back then was that the Spanish priests and officers were kind of trying to force the babaylans to give up their beliefs and to convert to Christianity, very specifically to Catholicism. But since being a babaylan or an asog has been part of our culture for like thousands of years, it was very difficult to give up. And so those who did not wish to give up their babaylan identities were actually murdered or experienced very violent death. In fact, it has been believed, it has been noted that many of them have been fed to crocodiles as part of their punishment for not giving up their babaylan identities and practices. And to those who have given up being babaylan and and allowed, becoming a Christian or a Catholic, some of them have tried to marry their practice or to merge their practice as babaylans and the newly found practice of Christianity in our society. So long and short of it, the early years of colonization in the Philippines has definitely decimated the powerful culture of our babaylans, and that included the trans women of among the babaylans. Next slide, please. So this is an image of one of the more recent, well, I know it's taken in the 1900s, early 1900s. This one is taken from the book of anthropology. And if you look at the title of the image, it says "Potters at Work." The one on the right is a man in women's garb. And this is an example of how the babaylan has become part of society or modern society, but has not been fully erased. So someone might ask if colonization has actually caused the oppression and the marginalization and the invisibility of babaylans in Philippine society, how did they survive? Well, because we have 7,100 islands, it is possible that some of them have successfully hid themselves from the Spanish forces, and they were able to continue their practices. So up to this day, there are babaylans among our people, or if you may refer to them as mandadawag or aplogan, like in this case. And if in the next slide, please. This is another image of babaylans back in the early 1900s, very specifically Papa Isyo. So Papa Isyo are among the babaylans who have also revolted against the Spanish. We have what we call the Tamblot Revolt in the Philippines back in the 17 and 1800s, but the revolt against the Spanish regime has continued until the late 1800s and early 1900s. And the babaylans were among those who have joined the revolution. In the next slide, please. These are images of some of the remaining babaylans in some of our provinces, very specifically the Ifugao. So they're sometimes referred to as a Mombaki. And I know that for some of us, we would consider some of the practices to be cruel towards animals, but it's part of their rituals. The rituals would have different meanings. And I'm showing these images to you because trans people have always been part of this culture. And in the Philippines, when during the colonial years, when trans people, LGBTQI people have been erased, from history books and blocked or prevented from participating in politics or decision making in our country, LGBT people, in particular trans people, have remained at least within the small pockets of existence of the babaylans. Next slide, please. Now, this is an image of the manananggal. So the manananggal, this one is painting or illustration by Noel Lyon Flores. The manananggal is one of the aswangs, actually one of the mythical monsters, in Philippine folklore. Mythological creatures have been part of Southeast Asian folklores. But the thing is, we could trace the difference of the interpretation of the folklores in pre-colonial times versus the colonial times. So this is an image of one of the folklores during the colonial years. What does this mean? This means that for the Spanish, they interpreted the babaylans as monsters because they go against the grain or they go against the teachings of Christianity or of the Bible. So they see the babaylans as a form of evil. And this particular interpretation, the manananggal, is that of a woman whose upper body separates from her lower body, goes around and then eats flesh. And that is a product of the colonial years, whereby they have demonized the babaylan, very specifically women and trans women. Next slide, please. But in spite of all of these demonizations, and the reinterpretations of the Babaylan folklore, we have remained to be part of our culture. And sometimes the Babaylan culture, like in the form of dance or music or in the way of dressing, is still being seen in some of our modern art, just like what this image tells us. Next slide, please. So I have started my presentation with the pre-colonial Babaylans to remind us that that is part of our history. But then during our post-war years, that is after the Spanish colonization and even after American colonization years, we are trying to retrace transness in Philippine society, and it's been quite a challenge. One way to trace transness is sometimes through pop culture and media. And these are just among the images that portrayed trans people in movies. So these are actually very, very famous and successful actors and actresses, but they're all cis actors or cisgender actors and actresses asked to portray the roles of trans women and trans men. And unfortunately, I sometimes refer to like a conversion therapy happens in the process. What do I mean by that? The transgender man character will be converted to becoming a cisgender woman at the end of the movie, whereby the transgender woman character will end up by herself, still remaining as a protagonist in the story, but will not have a really very happy ending. This is how Philippine media has portrayed trans people for a long time. And mostly, there is an injection of humor along the way, that assuming that trans people are funny, or at least the source of laughter. Next slide, please. And these are images of trans women, either in activism. That's the late Tonette Lopez, one of the founders of one of the first trans organization in the Philippines called Gahom. And then on the other side, we have two trans women, Helen Cruz and Boots Babushka. They are two of the first known out trans women in popular culture. Next slide, please. Now, in Philippine modern history, beauty pageant culture, which is something we share in common with Thai culture, which we're very happy to share that with our Southeast Asian sisters, is very much integrated into our society. And the thing is, I know that for some feminists, pageantry is a source of objectification or sexualization, but what some people do not understand, it is also a source of visibility and presence for trans women. This is one of the only few chances or platforms that trans women have to present themselves, to identify themselves, and to integrate themselves in society. And although they are source of entertainment for many common Filipinos, it has actually served also as a political platform for us to state our need for recognition and protection in terms of laws and practice. Next slide, please.
And just 2 minutes left, Brenda.
Okay. Yeah, so just some more images of beauty pageants. And next slide, please. And these are images of two renowned trans women who have actually detransitioned in public. And that is one of the challenges that we face in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Challenging the notion that being trans is all about transitioning. And so therefore, when someone detransitions, because they have found a Christian belief or a fortified Christian belief, then it confirms or affirms society's notion that trans women are not valid. So we are fighting against that, because transness is not about just transitioning. For some we transition and for others we don't. Next slide, please. Okay, in the year 2020, when the pandemic happened, so this will be my last slide for today's presentation. One of the most empowering moments in our society was when trans women continued to make their visibility felt through online means, by staging an online beauty pageant. This is, I think, a source of healing for our society, knowing that even if we have a shared experience of the pandemic, and in spite of all the discrimination and oppression experienced by trans people in our society, just like the Babaylans, the Asogs, and the Catalonans in our pre-colonial years, we will not be erased. So with that, thank you.
Bye-bye, Brenda.
thank you very much for inviting me to be here. This is a wonderful conference. It's so enthusiastic and nice. And it's also been particularly great for me because I met Esther Suwananan 5 years ago when she was a master's student in Thailand, and I was giving a paper. And she followed up, and then we kind of fell out of touch until we found out we were on the same panel. And it's really great that this university is having this kind of knowledge being produced, because what I'm going to be talking about is the surgeons that do work on Western bodies mostly, and some Thai bodies, and what they say about Thai bodies. It's so much more important that Thai people are actually producing the knowledge. So you guys are great here in Canada. Okay, so let's see. I pushed it. This one, right?
Yeah, we just need to go.
There. Okay, so Jai Kao Jai Rao is others' hearts, my hearts. And I'm going to read at the beginning when I'm quoting surgeons, and at the end, and then I'll just talk in the middle. This quote was given to me by the former chief and head professor of plastic surgery at Chulalongkorn University Medical School. Dr. Prayut Chakrarongvaron uses this Thai expression in the second of 40 interviews I conducted between 2010 and 2019 with surgeons, staff, government and non-government organizations related to trans-related medical practices for non-Thais in Thailand. I've been researching and archiving these websites produced by Thais in medical fields aimed at English-speaking audiences since 1997, but it was with this 2010 interview and Dr. Prayut's words, which spoke to the untranslatability suggested in a lot of these websites. This Thai phrase, others' heart, my heart, another's heart is my heart, describes a bond between people, a moral obligation, recognizing connection, and a linked embodiment that comes with many relationships in Thailand. But I did not expect this heart connection to refer to Thai doctor-patient relations. Once a surgeon agrees to work with a patient, there is the sense of commitment of care. And I've heard this from multiple surgeons since then. And there's a sense of linked embodiment. The surgeon strives to give the patient not only what they need, but also what the patient wants in the patient's terms. For example, at least until 2019, many patients in Thailand were provided direct access to their surgeons via cell phone, and they could call them at all times while in their care. In addition, patients can ask for unconventional results in an increasingly standardized surgical world, even concerning trans-related surgeries. This heart-based connection between people extends beyond the physical boundaries and illustrates a belief system and life view that manifests itself in the changing strategies, surgical practices, and standards of care, or variations of that, offered by Thais to their patients. At times, this manifests in ways unusual for US and North American practices, such as conducting rituals for patients who believe are accompanied by unseen forces or spirits, the surgeon has to help rid them of that in order to help them after they have an illness, if they're a surgeon that's not doing trans-related stuff, or just to facilitate their recovery. The other thing that's important is, according to the Thai sex gender regime, there's no pathology and no psychology related to transness. That doesn't mean there's not all kinds of inequalities going on with the way people are treated when they're not cis. But there's a sense that it's not something that needs a lot of psychological care. My interview and database of websites about trans-related surgery support evidence of these connections between surgeons and Western visitors and their manifestations that exceed our predominant vocabulary of post-colonial relations in a neoliberal global society. So when I'm talking about the West, I'm going to abbreviate it as Western Europe, North America, and Australia, but I just call it WENA, and I think that's a little more common in the United States than here. So WENA is Western Europe, North America, and the poor Australians are kind of on the end. I'm a Mac person.
No, me too. We'll get there together.
Thank you.
Want me to stand here and just change it as well?
Yeah. Is it okay? Okay, so this is a variety of slides from PI, which is the Precha Aesthetic Institute, which is the premier institute for people from Western Europe and North America to come to. It's the most expensive, and it's also where everyone who studies trans-related surgeries goes straight from medical school to do their residency, and then they can go on and do their own thing. Thailand's trans-related medical industry has grown and shifted remarkably over the past 25 years. Since 1997, Thailand as a destiny for medical travel has moved from periphery to center, with 64 internationally accredited hospitals promoting themselves through word of mouth in Thailand and via the World Wide Web in Wina. Non-Thai patients in Thailand have grown from an estimated few thousand, mostly expats or travelers already in Thailand, to an estimated 350,000 in 2018, excluding non-Thais located in Thailand. And over 1,000 of these were trans-related surgeries. I have absolutely no data on how many Thai people get surgeries, and this is something Esther and I were talking about before, because there's a system of kind of not keeping any accounts of what's going on with Thai people there. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so these are slides from ASEAN. I think it's very important that Thailand was never formally colonized. This is a source of national pride and taught universally in elementary education. I don't argue that Thailand does not feel the pressures of colonization, globalization, and subsequent capitalists and then neoliberal capitalist pulls, but it operated from a place of negotiation rather than occupation. Peter Jackson argues there's a unanimity, that's a hard one, among scholars of Thai history and culture that the binary model of colonized versus colonizer that underpins most post-colonial studies does not adequately capture the complexity of the Siamese/Thai situation, unquote. Tongchai Wanachoko points out that, quote, the borders of the modern Thai polity were determined by colonial powers, unquote. In other words, like, it really is just a response, but definitely part of the national pride. Thailand's semi-colonial history as a society long subjugated economically to global capital avoided direct political domination by the West, so it distinguishes itself from formerly colonized Southeast Asian neighbors. With this past at the forefront of this collective imaginary, reinforced through national education, the opportunity for Thai medical professionals to accrue expertise in the US in the 60s and 70s, while US doctors were shipped to military exercises in Vietnam, seems initially to be a kind of post-colonial tale. And for me, that tale, I kept asking people, it's so weird. All the doctors went from the US to Vietnam, and all the Thai doctors came from Thailand to the US. And Dr. Precha kept saying, no, you got it wrong. I had it wrong because I was making an implication that Vietnam and Thailand are comparable, but in a Thai sense, they haven't been colonized, so they are one and equal with the United States. So I just kept getting it wrong. It took me a while to figure that one out. Thank you. So Dr. Precha Teotranan is the leading doctor, and I'm going to give some quotes that he has told me in interviews over the years. He's founded the Precha Aesthetic Institute. It's the most highly regarded place for Western people to go get trans-related surgeries. Not many Thai people can afford to go, and they're not actually particularly that welcome there, but most of the other doctors have clientele. That said, it's very important to Dr. Precha that he works on rights for Thai people and for Gatai and trans people in the many ways they call themselves, Gatai, Salpratep Song, TG, Tom, and all those. He constantly talks about how important it is that those people receive representation while he's not working directly on their bodies. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and quote some of the things he told me about this. He explained in the first of our 4 interviews in 2011, we were educated to be specialists in the US. I received the opportunity to have the complete training, the same as the American surgeons. Because at the time of the Vietnam War, all the American doctors come to Vietnam. They asked Thai graduates to go there. That's why we got the opportunity to stay there and train. While in the US, we followed exactly the same training with the American doctors, but very, very few Americans stayed after training because all the American medical graduates were drafted to serve in Vietnam. So they ship, and we Thai doctors fill up all the positions. And he actually said that exact line to me twice in the course of 2 different interviews. He saw this as a great opportunity and credits his time in the US as formative to the excellence of all Thai surgeons. Okay, so next. Oh, okay, skip this. Great, okay. So, okay, so we only have 5 minutes left. In the context of this conference, it's, okay, I'm going to talk about some of the differences that happen because of this non-colonial idea of Thais enables them to do surgeries differently than following the standards of care from the World Professional Association from Transgender Health. Instead, they don't have FDA approval. I'm not sure if you have that here in Canada, but it really has certainly slowed down things in the US. And so all the doctors, once they start their own clinics, they're able to also make their own methods. This is the website for Preach Aesthetic Institute, but because I have 5 minutes, we're going to go here. So this is an example of Dr. Suporn's second page in, and if you look at the top line, you'll see that he developed his own form of surgery. It's called the Suporn method. In addition to that, there's another method that works with burn, follows the same method as burn skin, and that's the Sengguan method. Kaman has shipped his own stem cells off to China, reproduced them, and come back and experimented with his stem cells in order to find new ways to do trans-related surgeries. Oops. So you can go ahead to the next one. So as many clinics as there are slight variations. You go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you very much. Thank you for helping me. Okay, so this slide is important because you'll see when you look at the information about PI, which is the premier clinic, you can see everyone standing together. And that is one of the ways that you can actually see real expertise happening in Thailand, is that Thais will do the same surgery over and over and over again and work together. So you can go to Thailand and have 8 different trans-related surgeries done by 8 different surgeons at the same time. Anyone who's ever been under anesthesia, you can see the advantage of this. You can get something done in, so sometimes they advertise 4 hours. Realistically, it's 6 to 8 hours, something that would take 4 or 5 different surgeries, about 6 hours each. So the idea of working together in a community is one of the ways in which Thais really excel, and also doing one small surgery over and over again, so that you can see exactly when something goes wrong because you've done it thousands of times, is another way in which you would not find something like this in Weena that Thais can do. 2 minutes left. Okay. Let's go a couple slides ahead. One back. Okay, so can I go 2 back? Okay, so very quickly, WPATH has had 2 of the 18 outside of Weena. One in Buenos Aires, but in 2014 it was in Thailand, which speaks a lot about the standards of care and where the World Professional Association of Transgender Health puts their values. But the fact that the first one when it ever left Western Europe and North America happened in Thailand does speak to the efficacy of the education and the results. Oh, quick. Thank you very much. So, coming in full circle, Talk to Preacher doesn't do surgery anymore, but he's increasingly committed to speaking both locally and internationally about the importance of the legal name change recognition for Gatoi and trans populations in Thailand. Furthermore, he is committed to training Weena doctors. He doesn't have them work for the high-paying Western clients, though. He brings Western doctors to the university hospital where he used to teach, and he has them work on Thai patients for small fees, so that more Thais are now receiving the benefits of the surgeries priced above most Thai income levels, in the efforts to attract non-Thai experts to follow these methods. Since 2009, Weena surgeons have done work on education, and he claims there's been about 18 to 20 people that have come and worked at the Chulalongkorn Hospital and trained under his methods. And in my most recent interview with him on 2018, he commented on how Vietnam was the newest emerging country to allow trans surgeries, but how there was only one surgeon who didn't have enough supervision or experience, and how he wanted to fund bringing over this Vietnamese surgeon rather than Vietnamese people coming to Thailand to get surgery. So there is this real idea that the first world versus, helping those around, including the US. So Dr. Precha said he's eager to help previously colonized neighbors, and in the spirit of providing advanced medical knowledge as a first world expert with a commitment to meeting the needs of trans people in all the ways they see fit. While the national pride of non-colonization has led to ethical service towards improving trans health, rarely is the relationship between history, Thailand, the US, and Vietnam considered a non-binary colonizer framework. And I think this is really important because it really helps explain the innovation, expertise, and internationalization of Thai surgeons. Thank you very much. I'm very excited for your questions.